The thermometer stopped working not because the battery died, not because it malfunctioned, because the liquid inside it frozen solid at minus 68 degrees Celsius. Even the instruments give up. The trees crack like gunshots in the dark. Metal contracts so hard you can hear the hut groan. And somewhere inside that glowing arch of corrugated steel, one man is alive, warm and completely unbothered. How? That question is going to change everything you think you know about shelter, survival, and human ingenuity. Because what this man figured out, living inside what looks like a giant tin can in the most brutal cold on Earth, is not luck. It is engineering. It is wisdom. And it is a masterclass that most people will never learn because they're too busy dismissing the structure as primitive. It is not primitive. It is perfect. The Quonset hut was born in 1941. The United States military needed a shelter they could ship anywhere on Earth, assemble with basic tools, and trust in conditions that would destroy conventional buildings. They needed it fast. They needed it cheap. And they needed it to work in jungles, deserts, Arctic tundra, and everything in between. What the engineers at Quonset Point Naval Air Station in Rhode Island designed was a half-cylinder of corrugated steel with a semicircular cross-section and no vertical walls. Just a pure arch from ground to ground. It looked simple. It was genius. The arch shape is not aesthetic. It is structural mathematics. When snow accumulates on a curved surface, it slides. Flat roofs collapse under the weight of heavy snowfall because all that load presses straight down on a horizontal plane. The arch redirects that force. Instead of pushing down, the weight transfers outward and downward along the curve, distributing stress across the entire structure rather than concentrating it at a single point. In regions where snowfall can exceed 2 meters in a single storm, this is not a minor advantage. It is the difference between a building that stands and one that kills you in your sleep. By the end of World War II, over 170,000 Quonset huts had been built and deployed across the globe. They went up in hours. They survived bombardment zones. They were heated with a single stove and used as hospitals, barracks, chapels, and machine shops. When the war ended, thousands were sold as surplus. Alaskans bought them, and what started as military pragmatism became something far more interesting, a survival culture built around a steel arch and intelligence to use it. Now here is where most people make their first mistake. They look at corrugated steel, and they think cold. Metal conducts heat. Touch a steel railing at minus 40, and it will pull the warmth out of your skin in under a second. So, how does a metal building become a viable home at minus 68? The answer is layering. And the man living in this hut has engineered that layering with the precision of someone who knows that getting it wrong means dying. The interior of a properly converted Quonset hut bears no resemblance to the outside. The steel shell is just that, a shell. Inside, wooden framing runs along the curved walls, creating a gap between the metal exterior and the living space. That gap is packed with insulation. In modern builds, closed-cell spray foam is sprayed directly onto the interior of the steel, creating a thermal barrier that also acts as a vapor blocker. Then rigid foam boards go over that. Then another air gap. Then the interior wall. By the time you're standing inside, you are separated from that minus 68 air by a layered sandwich of materials specifically designed to slow the transfer of heat down to nearly nothing. The floor is just as critical. Concrete poured directly onto frozen ground becomes a radiator, but instead of pumping heat in, it pumps heat out. The solution is a floating floor system. Rigid insulation boards go down first, then a subfloor, then finished flooring on top of that. The ground beneath might be permafrost dropping to minus 10 or colder, but the floor surface stays warm because the heat has nowhere to escape downward. This is where most off-grid beginners destroy their build before they ever light the first fire. They insulate the walls. They forget the floor. They wonder why they burn through twice the firewood and still feel cold from the knees down. The floor is not optional. The floor is everything. Now, look at that chimney in the image. That thin pipe rising from the top of the arch with steam pouring out of it. That chimney is the heart of this entire operation, and it demands respect. At minus 68, the temperature differential between the inside of that flue pipe and the outside air is extraordinary. We're talking about gases at several hundred degrees Celsius passing through a pipe surrounded by air that is nearly 70 degrees below zero. That differential is what creates draft. Strong, powerful draft that pulls combustion gases out of the firebox and up and out of the building with tremendous force. Good draft means the fire burns hot and clean. Hot, clean fires produce less creosote. Creosote is the black, tarry residue that coats the inside of flue pipes when combustion is incomplete, when the fire smolders rather than burns. At extreme cold, if a fire is allowed to die down overnight, the drop in flue temperature allows creosote to solidify in thick layers. Enough buildup, and that creosote becomes fuel itself. Chimney fires in extreme cold environments are catastrophic. The pipe can reach temperatures that compromise the structure around it. In a metal building packed with insulation and with framing, that is a death sentence. So the man in this hut does not let the fire die. He sizes his wood stove for the space, not a romantic little cast iron antique, but a serious, high-output heater engineered to maintain combustion temperature for hours on a single load of wood. Larger fireboxes hold bigger pieces. Bigger pieces burn longer and hotter. He feeds a hardwood, when he can get it, because hardwood is denser, burns longer, and produces more BTUs per kilogram than softwood. In Alaska's boreal forest, birch is the gold standard. A cord of birch contains roughly 23 million BTUs. At minus 68, he might burn through that cord in 3 to 4 weeks of continuous heating. Now think about what 3 to 4 weeks of firewood looks like physically. We're talking about a stack of wood 4 feet wide, 4 feet tall, and 8 feet long, just for 1 month. Over a full winter, from October through April in interior Alaska, he needs somewhere between 4 and 8 cords depending on insulation quality, hut size, and how brutal the season runs. That wood has to be cut, split, stacked, dried, and staged close enough to the hut that he can access it during a wide-out blizzard without losing his bearings and dying 20 meters from his own front door. People in warm climates read that last sentence and think it is dramatic. It is not dramatic. It is documentation. At minus 68, exposed skin develops frostbite in under 90 seconds. A man who steps outside to retrieve firewood and cannot find his way back to the door in a zero-visibility storm will not survive long enough to try again. This is why experienced Alaskan homesteaders run a rope, a literal rope, from a hut door to the woodpile. Not a metaphor. A rope tied to both points, gripped in a gloved hand when visibility drops to nothing and the difference between the woodpile and open wilderness is impossible to distinguish. The windows you see glowing warm amber in that image are both the most beautiful part of this scene and its greatest thermal vulnerability. Glass, even modern double-pane glass, has an R value, a measure of thermal resistance, of roughly R2. The insulated walls around it might be R40 or higher. Every window is a hole in the thermal envelope of the building, and heat pours through those holes like water through a sieve. So why have windows at all? Psychological survival. This is not discussed enough in off-grid content. Extended darkness, confined spaces, and the visual monotony of an all-white world with no natural light are not minor inconveniences. They are documented causes of cognitive decline, depression, and dangerous decision-making in isolated cold weather environments. The windows are not a luxury. They are a mental health infrastructure. They let in light during the few hours of winter daylight. They give a visual connection to the outside world. They tell you whether a storm is past or is still raging without requiring you to open a door and step into the cold. The solution to the heat loss problem is not eliminating windows. It is managing them. Heavy insulated curtains hang over every window when daylight is absent. Some builders install shutters, exterior panels of rigid foam that close over the glass from outside. Triple pane glazing with argon or krypton gas fill between the panes pushes the R value from 2 up to 7 or 8. Every improvement helps. None is perfect. The man in this hut has accepted that windows cause heat and has balanced that cost against his need to remain psychologically functional over months of polar winter. The door is the next vulnerability. Look at the image again. The entrance on the right side of the hut has a small overhang, but no visible vestibule. That enclosed transitional space between the bitter outside and the heated inside. Every time that door opens without a vestibule, the temperature differential drives an exchange of air that pulls heated interior air out and drives freezing outside air in. At minus 68, this is not a slow exchange. It is violent. The temperature inside can drop several degrees in seconds. The professional solution is an Arctic entry, essentially a small insulated room built onto the entrance that creates an airlock. You step outside into the Arctic entry. The outer door closes behind you. Temperature equalizes slightly. Then you open the inner door into the heated space. The pressure exchange is staged rather than sudden. Heat loss drops dramatically. This same principle is used in commercial cold storage facilities and the airlocks of Antarctic research stations. It is not complicated. It just requires building it. Now the fuel question. Many off-grid homesteaders rely on propane for cooking, backup heating, and generator fuel. At minus 68, this becomes a serious problem. Propane liquefies at minus 42 degrees Celsius at standard pressure. Below that temperature, propane in a standard outdoor tank cannot vaporize properly and the appliance it feeds stops functioning. Interior Alaska regularly sees temperatures below minus 42. A man depending on propane at minus 68 may find himself with full tanks and no usable fuel. The workarounds are precise. Keeping propane tanks inside a heated space so the liquid stays above vaporization temperature, which creates explosion risk if not properly ventilated. Using larger tanks with more thermal mass so they take longer to cool, switching to natural gas where possible, or moving entirely to wood and diesel for all critical functions. Diesel has a gel point around minus 40 for standard formulations, but Arctic-rated diesel treated with anti-gel additives functions reliably at minus 60 and below. This is what powers emergency generators and the vehicles that make this life logistically possible. Water is the next problem, and it is not a small one. At minus 68, any water exposed outside temperatures freezes in minutes. Water lines running through unheated spaces freeze and burst. The physics of water expanding by roughly 9% when it freezes means pipes do not just stop working, they split. Copper, plastic, iron, all of it. The solutions are either heat tape wrapped around every line with a thermostat-controlled electrical system keeping the pipes above freezing, or burying the lines so far below ground, below the frost line, that the Earth's geothermal warmth keeps them liquid. In interior Alaska, frost lines extend 5 to 6 feet below the surface. Digging that deep in permafrost requires equipment and serious effort. For homesteaders without the infrastructure for buried lines, the practical solution is hauling water. Insulated containers, carried inside, melted if necessary from snow, stored near the stove. Solar power at minus 68 in interior Alaska faces two simultaneous enemies, darkness and cold. Winter days in the far interior of Alaska can offer as few as 3 to 4 hours of usable light. Panels buried under snow produce nothing. Even cleared panels in that brief window generate a fraction of their rated capacity. Lithium batteries, the most efficient modern storage technology, begin losing capacity below 0 Celsius and fail catastrophically at minus 40. The solution is keeping battery banks inside the heated envelope of the hut. The panels outside, connected by lines run through insulated conduit, feed a battery system living in the warmth alongside the man, supplemented by a diesel generator for the weeks. When storms keep panels buried and cloud cover blocks what little sun exists, this hybrid approach keeps lights on and critical systems running. Food storage outside at minus 68 sounds like the perfect natural freezer. In some ways it is. Nothing spoils. But temperatures this extreme create problems that conventional freezer storage does not. Can goods freeze? The liquid inside expands. The seams fail. The contents, once thawed, are compromised or lost entirely. Vegetables freeze so hard that ice crystal formation ruptures cell walls at the microscopic level. The texture upon thawing becomes mush rather than food. The practical Alaskan approach is a root cellar built below the frost line where temperatures hover around 0 to minus 5, cold enough to preserve without destroying. Items that can handle hard freezing, meat, certain grains, dry goods, go outside. Items requiring gentler cold go underground. This is not improvised. This is a food system engineered over generations of trial, error, and genuine hunger. The vapor barrier issue is the one that destroys the most well-intentioned cold weather builds, and it is the least discussed. When warm, humid interior air meets a cold surface, moisture condenses. Inside a Quonset hut, without proper vapor control, that condensation happens inside the wall assembly, between insulation layers, on the interior surface of the steel shell, in places invisible to the eye. Over time, that moisture saturates insulation, dramatically reducing its thermal performance. It promotes mold growth inside wall cavities. In extreme cold, that condensed moisture freezes, expands, and physically damages the structure from inside. The fix is a continuous vapor barrier on the warm side of the insulation, typically a polyethylene sheet sealed at every seam and penetration with tape. It sounds tedious to install. The alternative is watching a carefully built hut slowly rot from the inside, while wondering why it's getting harder to stay warm. There's a layer of knowledge that lives in Alaskan communities that does not exist in YouTube tutorials or off-grid influencer content. It is accumulated generational wisdom, passed from fathers to sons, from old homesteaders to young ones, from neighbors who have watched each other make mistakes and learned from them over decades. The knowledge of which would burns hottest in your specific region, which direction to orient the hut entrance to minimize prevailing wind exposure, how to read the sound of the trees to know when temperatures are dropping dangerously fast, how to feel the quality of the air when a serious storm is coming long before any forecast would show it. This knowledge is not romantic. It is functional, and the man living in that glowing hut has it, or he would not still be alive in his second or third or 10th winter. At -68, the margin for error is not thin. It does not exist. A stove that goes out at midnight, and a man who sleeps through it may wake to find interior temperatures have dropped below -20. At that point, hypothermia is not an outdoor risk. It is an indoor one. The discipline required to maintain a fire through an extreme cold night, waking every 3 to 4 hours to reload the firebox, checking the chimney draft, confirming the temperature gauge, is a discipline that separates the men living this life from the ones who tried it once and left. The total real cost of this life is not cheap in the way people imagine it. The hut itself, purchased new, runs between $15,000 and $50,000 depending on size and configuration. Insulation, framing, flooring, windows, doors, and the Arctic entry add another $10,000 to $30,000. The wood stove, properly sized and safety installed, costs $2,000 to $6,000. The chimney system, critically important, another $2,000 to $4,000. Water system, generator, solar panels and battery bank, food stores for a full winter, tools, emergency equipment, snow machine for mobility. The first year setup cost for a serious, safe, functional off-grid Quonset hut in interior Alaska is realistically $100,000 or more, not counting land. What it costs after that is labor. Every day is physical. Firewood, water, maintenance, food preparation, equipment care. The man living in this hut is not on vacation. He is working harder than most people work in conventional life, just toward a different set of goals. And yet that image, that warm amber glow pushing through frost-covered windows, the chimney steam rising against a sky the color of deep bruises, the silence of the landscape so cold it has gone completely quiet. There is something in that image that reaches through every screen, past every comfortable life, and touches something ancient in the human brain that recognizes that glowing warmth in the darkness as the most fundamental thing we have ever needed. One man, one arch of steel, one fire burning against the coldest air on earth. Not luck, not madness. Mastery.